How can one man know so much having learned so little? Paul, chapter 4. The morning light burst through the trees as if it were an eye that winked. The eye that was once one then became two, the pair that see everything and miss nothing. Because these eyes are everywhere, and if they see the whole 9 yards, how much more the hearts of men. Betty's thoughts escaped her, like a runaway train that suddenly stopped and parked outside her house. As the clock read 10:10, and the giant scroll said, "It's finished." Betty wondered about that. Well, she looked around because her hands were in everything. In the pot, on the cooker, and on the top of little Tim's head. He ran this way and that, and back to the wall. He was about to charge, and she held her hand up and said, "Stop what you're doing, or get out of my sight." Tim pulled over the chair and sat at the table. Betty shook her head and stuck her head up out of the pot. Little Tim picked up the wooden spoon and in a playful mood hit her bum. She turned and laughed, and Tim did too, and he ran and hid in the big blue shoe. It was Tim's new bed that his dad had made for him with his own hands. Betty stood over him, the spoon in hand, and watched him fall asleep, and thought about what Father Tom had said. A whip for the horse, a bridle for the donkey, and a rod for the back of fools. But her mind answered, the child does not know right from wrong. Teach him the way, lead him on the good and right path, and when he is older, he will never stray from it. Betty went back to her pot, dipped the spoon in, took it out, blew over it, tasted the soup. "Boo stew, boo stew," she repeated. Boo was the second eldest in a family of 6. Her birth made the headlines due to the fact she had tiny head and a little feet. From that day, she never was far away from the attention of anyone that came within eyeshot. She was in the habit of constantly putting herself down by telling jokes, avoiding the glaring eyes of those who passed her. Her father was a Dubliner while her mother was the same. However, her mother, Boo's grandmother, was an Indian who came to Dublin to work as a nurse in 1947, not long after the war. Boo was very restless, always on the move, wandering through the back lanes and alleys, looking for her fella, as she called him, who in reality was anything but. He was Chubster's chuckle, happy by the minute, happy by the hour, and happy by the day. He liked to drink, the women and the horses. He was fond of Boo. He'd kiss her cheek and wink, saying, "Boo, you're the only woman for me." He lied. She knew it. Boo liked it. She tried to believe it. This belief lasted for only a brief moment when she entered what she referred to as her blue period or her blue day. She went through life believing that everyone had a bullseye view of her, except Chubster Chuckle and Betty. Secretly, she loved Chubster. As for Betty, she was the closest thing to a living saint. On the subject of Chubster, a lot of women liked him. He was a good-humoured man, gentle and tough, all at once, ready to defend his corner when the occasion called for it. One night, 3 local women laughed the night away at Boo's expense. Chubs, as Boo called him, got up from the table and went and told them to stop. He said, "When you're not nice, you're ugly. You're just a picture on the wall, worthy of a glance. but nothing more. So go over to my friend and apologise. The women were furious. Their men were angry. They all rose, screaming and roaring, until Chubbs and the three men took it outside. Bill's pleas fell on deaf ears. Her cries went nowhere. The public house went quiet as a sinner in a confession box. Bill sat with her hands covering her face, afraid to look up. The woman sat drank. They laughed, they cheered, tipping their glasses and toasting their already planned victory. The barman went to the phone. A rough-looking man wearing a cap advised him not to make that call. He switched his glance and snubbed out a cigarette as it fell from his mouth and found its resting place under his shoe. Like an obedient schoolboy, he did what he was told and cleaned the glasses, listening intensely to the noise outside. Everyone's eyes were on the doors. The sound of the streets fell into a hushed silence. The only sound that could be heard was the wind blowing, like a scene from a spaghetti western. Everyone was so focused on the front doors that they never heard the side door opening and close. And then, out of the toilets, Chubbs emerged, washed and happy, the victor. The three men ran off. The ladies did the same, abandoning their drinks, grabbing their coats and fleeing. No one ever laughed at Boo again. She slept peacefully. The next morning, she went out. She was to call on Betty, but she was late. They'd arranged to meet at 9. Whatever could be the matter, Boo was never late. She looked at the clock. 10:05. Boo pushed open the doors of his shop. The doorbell rang as she stepped in. Boo was shopping for a potion. She was looking for a potion that would help her grow big feet. With age came pain, and so it came to pass that she spent every penny that she'd ever earned on doctors, but to no avail. The desperation grew as she wandered the aisles. What she did not realise was that her quest for a cure would not only change her life, but take it away. Not for a moment, not for a day, but forever. The man behind the counter gave her a surprised look, as if he was hiding something behind his back. That is, because the potion belonging to him was hidden, the one he had made all by himself in the dark of night, the one that would bring him fame. All that is needed is a victim, a guinea pig, he thought. On second glance he mumbled, "If she's not the very one, nobody is." Betty placed her hand on the counter. He looked at her lips. She gazed at his eyes, once, twice, and one time more. He fixed his gaze on her mouth, and neither said a word. His focus came closer and closer, still looking at her the way a scaredy optician would. But little did she know that a man walked past. The bell rang because he now strolled in, right on time. Just as she fell, the potion slipped out of her hand as she hit the ground hard. but she reached out and touched the hem of his coat as the potion spilled onto the ground where she lay. John Harrison's clock was the only sound that could be heard. She looked at the aged man. He returned the look. The man behind the counter came back to himself. And then Betty looked up. She looked at the clock. 10:10. Betty turned towards it again, still lying on the ground, and mouthed John 10:10 as she read the calendar upside down, which said 77:19, not 19, 77. And then the man with the grey hair and the beautiful eyes, kind and friendly, lifted her up. Chapter 5. Boo was a native to misfortune. Her family were not. They were a made family in a real world. The one Boo didn't live in, because all she met there were people who stared at her with angry faces. The disapproving glances felt like daggers, each one piercing her confidence as she tried to navigate the crowded streets. Her world was dreamy. In it, she was thin, young, who lived in a garden. The vibrant colours of the flowers surrounded her, each petal whispering secrets of nature. As she wandered through the lush greenery, she felt a sense of freedom and possibilities. Yes, she felt anything was possible, as if it could happen. She was often visited by the same dream. Right in the garden was a man, a white-haired man in the garden. He had his back to her. Without saying a word, she knew she was to follow him. As she stepped closer and closer still, she followed him in that garden without saying a single word. Boo was happy, content in her dream world, in a world where she only existed, her and the man she stepped close to. Now, as she came closer and closer, as she stepped there was an overwhelming sense of familiarity. It washed over her, urging her to take the next step. The man turned slightly, revealing a gentle smile that she felt comfortable with. She was sure she'd seen him before, in some other place. The smile radiant warmth and understanding, creating a sense of comfort. At the moment, one that lingered, it was clear that there was genuine empathy that had bridged the gap between them. It was a smile of a loving father. But once she turned and went her own way, that was the mistake, where she'd find herself spinning and spinning out into the sky, falling endlessly. And as she did, she saw the ship bound for the port, a great wind on the sea and such violent storm. A hand would come out of nowhere and save her. Then she would awake, and as she did, she would appear like she was in that version of herself in that dream. Boo never knew that, because once she stepped from the bed and looked in the mirror, all would remain as it had been the day before. She was the same. Her father and mother loved her. They doted on her. In doing this, they also danced around her, speaking to her as if she was a child. But she wasn't, and neither were they. It was all game playing. Her mother wore so many masks that Boo once said, "The last time I seen me ma's real face was when I was 2. Her mother smiled and said, "Boo uses rough voices and words. The way she does that is to blend in with who knows what." "Who knows what?" her father echoed. "Yes, who knows what?" repeated her mother. Boo's mother's name was Dimple, and her father's name was Pimple, who the family and friends and everybody who knew him called him Doberman. Not because he looked like one, but because he was a sort of, well, in the tiniest ways, sort of resembled Snoop Dogg. "Sit down and I will make you something to eat. You look starving," blurted Dimple to Boo, while she cleaned her toes with a toothbrush. Dimple's mouth went to the place where no one understood what it was because it was hanging at the junction of a smile and a curled lip, while she blinked 1,000 times per second. What? She's cleaning her feet with her brush? Boo stared at her. "Starving. I look starving." Standing up, placing her finger on her lips, she paused, but then broke the silence and said, "So, ma'am, tell me, how does that look?" "What I meant was, I know what you meant." She raised her voice. "But go on. Tell me, how does a person with little feet, a huge belly, a tiny head look?" She paused. Dimple bit down on her bottom lip. The blinking started up again, increasing from 1,000 to a cool 1,000,000. 1,000,000 blinks per second. She ran outside, did Dimple. The blinking was so rapid that she began to lift off the ground, until she eventually stood on her hands and then gripped the earth. The hole she dug was like a heart. Right then, without a moment's consideration, she knew she had spent her life trusting in herself. The message was clear. So she sat on the ground and looked up, away from herself. Doberman, well, he shoved his hands into his pocket so far that he pulled up his stockings. He blew his lips together the way one does when a person blows hair from their face. Saliva shot out and his eyes and nose bulged. The noise was so loud that the neighbour opened the window, looked left and right up the street, mumbling, "I was sure I heard an earthquake." There in that moment, like none before, Doberman sunk into the wall and offered Boo his feet. The image of the father's offering spoke to her, spoke one word, and that was love, the love of a father. Boo gazed at her feet and refused to lift her head. Dimple came back to earth and said, "You are our very own, the nicest person who ever was and ever could be, my darling daughter." They hugged her. Boo felt a warmth spread through her, but the weight of the insecurities held her back. She wished she could believe Dimple, to see herself through those encouraging eyes. Instead, the shadow of doubt that loomed over her spoke volumes. In a flashing second, she saw in her mind's eye a young man look at her. Then, for the tiniest ticks of the clock, she could see herself, with her head pretty, thin, rising above the sea of despair, where she could see the dawn in a forever bright sky. And she thought, if only I could believe. The postman came by. They knew this, because they heard the letterbox open and close. Dimple ran to the door and saw the letter there, and she shouted out, "Thank you, right on time, Mark, 9:23, right on time." Chapter 6. To sit with the wise is to become like them. The gardener. The rolling clouds ran across the sky. Mr. Don loved Dublin. He'd taken himself into town most days and have a coffee. He'd sit outside the shop watching the passer-bys rush into their day. One of those outings, as he sat drinking his coffee, he sighed. It was a cold day. The traffic was bumper to bumper. He'd gotten the most dreadful news from the bank. The news was not to his liking, nor would it be to Paul's. He was assured of that. Now it happened. On a certain day, as work came to a close, Mr. Don told Paul that the cash he was waiting for had not come through. Pointing heavenward, he jested, "There is a battle going on above." Paul was in shock. Everything that he had saved went on the workers' wages because halfway through the project, Paul knew he'd underpriced the job. Then there was the problem with the manholes in the garden. To fix it, they'd have to dig 15 feet down, which added an extra 10% to the cost. So it left him broke. He hadn't the heart to tell Betty. He'd never blame Mr. Don. "Don't be afraid. The money will come in. I have another account. I have them in a secret place. But be of good cheer. I have a good friend who will help us." Now, Paul felt sorry that he'd gotten himself in that predicament. "Don't worry. I've loads of work on. I'll make up the difference on the next job. You'll see." He lied and cried. When he thought no one was looking, he wept aloud. However, the old man heard him. On a positive note, Betty encountered a crowd when she arrived the following morning at the factory. People had gathered outside, but when she made her way through, she was gobsmacked at what she saw. It was Boo. She had a normal-sized head and feet, and she was altogether beautiful. There was no way of describing the moment. Boo brought the traffic inside and out to a stop. Her transformation was beyond mind-blowing. Betty could hardly believe her eyes as she took in Buse. She called her in that moment Buse, crossing words, mixing them up as Boo, beautiful. She said, "Buse." Bue's radiant appearance, which seemed to light up the dreary morning. The energy in the air was electric, and whispers of admiration filled the crowd as they watched Boo move with effortless grace that captivated everyone around her. As she twirled, the sunlight caught her hair, creating a halo effect that made her look almost otherworldly. It was a moment that could linger forever in memories of all those who saw her, of the extraordinary power of self-expression, the beauty of being unapologetic, of her self, her renewal, her transformation. Being heavy-set never suited Boo. It did other women. Other women suited very well. Bubble Up, who worked in the factory and sold fish ramah on the weekend, was stunning. It suited her well. She was a heavy-set woman and she could carry it. And she did. No problem. In this remarkable twist of fate, Boo became a kind of celebrity. Her story made headlines in the news and appeared in the papers. She was on the radio doing interviews. While she was always the one who drew attention, this time it was for the right reasons. Betty was overjoyed. Everybody wanted to be Boo's friend. This saddened her. How fickle people are, she thought. She was so sad over how foolish, people were, she also wept aloud. Bill was a kind person. She never blamed anyone. She held no grudge. Bitterness was not allowed to dwell with her. Oh, like a betraying friend, one that comes with nice words, but darkness, plotting, evil is in his heart. Bitterness came to visit her, but she never entertained it for too long. She lay in her bed and cried, even over the people that had hurt her, because she knew how weak humans were. Then she had a dream. In the dream was the man. He walked ahead, she followed, and they sat by a well. Everybody likes me now. Everyone? Yes, well, everyone I know. Everyone might like you, but your parents loved you. People might be kind, but it was Betty who was your friend. See, in all your trials you found a pearl in Betty. In everything you went through, you made good your character. When there was hate, you gave love. In all your tears, he paused, reached behind him and lifted a bottle. Look, here are all your tears, not one wasted, because not one was spent on yourself, but on those who even mistreated you. He pointed to a tree. Can you see that tree? Yes. That tree stands 10,000 kilometers from where we sit, and yet you see it. The one behind you is the same, and yet you see that without turning. She switched her glance from left to right and could see amazing sights, but her mind was open to fathom unexplained mathematical equations faster than the speed of light. In that stopping moment, he said, in the world you live in, humans are limited. It's not what you do in your strength what impresses, but what you do in weakness. I know a man who once walked the earth, who boasted in nothing else. Suddenly a face of a young man came to focus. He was handsome. He had beautiful eyes. He was ruddy in appearance, like a boy that had walked in out of the field. He was altogether human, but there was something about him. Then she saw another image flash before her of a fallen king. And as she considered this, the gardener spoke. Men are commended by their good sense and judgment, but the one of perverse mind is despised. In an instant, she saw beings on earth collecting the tears of humans. It was a very busy world she saw, and all the words that were spoken. The words of the righteous were like silver. Human words were very important to these beings. They were collecting every word spoken from every human being that ever lived. And then she saw a man without words. And then she saw a man come to life and being given them. Then suddenly she woke up. Chapter 7. To be miserable takes no effort. To be joyful does. Betty. It was finished. The house, that is. It took 7 weeks from the foundation to the roof. And now another 7 weeks had passed. And things went bad to worse for Betty and Paul. Now it happened, as it often does in such tales, that as Betty was out and about, an aged man intruded upon her. She'd never seen him before. He, however, seemed to know her. He told her to take an envelope that he had in his hand. She refused. He insisted. She said no. He said, take it. I will not. You better had. I'll do no such thing. So he placed it in her bag, telling her the envelope was for her husband. She demanded that he tell her who he was and what was in the envelope. He smiled gently and took her hand, shook it and strolled off. She strolled as well, and then looked over her shoulder as she did. The encounter unsettled her. She wanted to throw that envelope away, fearing it was from the courts. Paul had a problem or two with jobs going wrong. It wasn't anything he did or malicious, it was his inexperience. Once again, he'd run out of money, so to fix the situation, he'd labour into the late nights and late hours of the night, just to get the job done. But the clients somehow were not happy, even though the fact he got them done, but they didn't finish on time. When Betty arrived home, she placed the envelope on the mantelpiece and left it there. Throwing her necklace on top of it, it broke. The diamonds, imitation ones, spread across the mantelpiece like a castle on a board game. Days passed, long nights crawled in, and the envelope remained unnoticed. As the months went by, the envelope became hidden under piles of unpaid bills. Then one bright morning, as Betty cleaned the house, the sunlight rushed through the wide open window and lit upon the diamonds. Sparkling, they called her attention. She stopped in her tracks, rested her hand on the broom and gazed intently at them. She braved the moment and took one step, then another, towards them. With one right hand, which she had on top of the brush, she stretched out her left. In a sweeping moment, she cast the other envelopes to the floor. They tumbled like dead soldiers and scattered like falling leaves. Not one of the diamonds fell. Instead, they gathered themselves as an infantry under the authority of a leader. She was awestruck at what she saw. Her eyes popped like corks on a champagne bottle. She looked here and there and everywhere. Her mouth opened so wide that her tongue dropped so low that she could have cleaned the floor with it if she had a mind to do so. What the envelope contained as she opened it was a cheque for £20,000. Her heart skipped a beat, then another. Her breath escaped her for a brief second. Trembling, she lit a cigarette, inhaling a lungful. The smoke gushed out of her mouth, increasing with each new drag. She stubbed it in the ashtray and lit another. Then she wailed and collapsed to her knees. She was in such a state of mind that she began to clap her hands together repeatedly. She saw herself, in her mind's eye, her and Paul, like 1950 movie stars. Betty rose and plummeted to the deck, and then she fell onto that floor, kicking and beating the floorboards and screaming with excitement. Suddenly, all the day's events flashed by her eyes in the rapid concession, one after another, like a reel. Then she sat and looked at the cheque and put her hand to her mouth and stared endlessly in silence.